This is On the Line, the voice of the Delphi Salaried Retirees Association. Michael Hissam reporting, July 13th, 2022. More than 43,000 emails and countless phone calls have been sent to Capitol Hill in support of H.R. 6929, otherwise known as the Susan Muffley Act. If passed by the House, then by the Senate, and signed by President Biden, the Delphi salaried pensions would be fully reinstated. The 13-year pension nightmare would finally be over, albeit too late for too many. In this special report, we are on the line with two co-sponsors of the bill who are longtime DSRA advocates. Democratic Representative Dan Kildee of Michigan's 5th Congressional District and Republican Representative Mike Turner of Ohio's 10th Congressional District. And Representative Kildee, first off, thank you for being part of what is a very, very important report to DSRA members. The questions. Why do you believe this legislation offers hope and the best opportunity now to solve what has been a 13-year nightmare for basically more than 2,000 members who are in your congressional district, as well as thousands more across the country?
Well, first of all, Mike, thanks for doing this. I appreciate the chance to talk to you and to communicate directly with the Delphi salaried retirees who have lived this injustice now, as you said, for 13 years, and for some, it's too late. But the reason the legislation is important is that if we can get this through the House and the Senate and over to the President's desk, it's done. No one else can second guess this. I had hoped that we would be able to resolve this through the legal process. I was enormously disappointed and actually quite angry the way the series of administrations treated this. The case against the PBGC was a solid case, but they did everything they could to stall and delay and to cause a lot of time and expense for the DSRA. So this legislative fix, if we can get it through, and I'm doing everything I can to make that happen, gets to the President's desk, and as soon as the ink is dry on his signature, the back pay will go to the retirees and the pensions will be restored to the promised levels. And so to me, the reason this is the way to do it is that it's a final solution. It gets it done. And we're just doing everything we can to make this happen.
Congressman Turner, we thank you for joining us. I want you to take a closer look at the bill for a moment. What does this bill call for? What do you see as key points in the legislation?
Well, Michael, I appreciate, first off, being an opportunity to discuss this with you, and certainly your strong advocacy and all of the advocacy of the Delphi salary retirees. What's been really clear from the very beginning is that this was an injustice. The White House picked winners and losers in the General Motors and Delphi bankruptcy, and this injustice, which was shown by the IG, the SIG TARP, the Special Inspector General for the TARP program, where the TARP funds were used through the bankruptcy processes for General Motors and by association then Delphi, identified that it was an injustice. And so myself and other members of Congress, and certainly the Delphi salary retirees group, have, as you were relating, been strong advocates in Congress and to Congress for action. The Delphi salary retirees have shown their expertise that made General Motors and Delphi a successful company, because the manner in which you have approached this, both in advocacy, in substantive analysis of what the PBGC had done and what needs to be done, it has really been excellent and great tools and assistance for us. And of course, it was so important that you filed suit to raise these issues in federal court that I think has had a great influential impact on Congress itself. The bill is a restoration of the retiree benefits. It would restore the pensions, including looking at back payment. Our goal, our hope, is to pass this bill so that what was federal action in taking away these retirees' benefits would be federal actions putting them back.
You were a signatory on the letter to the PBGC Board of Directors seeking action. They responded by saying legislation would be required to reinstate the full pension plan. We now see about 30 other congressional representatives signed on. These signers are from both sides of the aisle. So how critical will continued bipartisanship be in making this effort a success? And as you understand, there are people in the field who wonder if there is no longer bipartisanship. Help us understand.
Well, there is bipartisanship. It doesn't make the news because it's not as interesting as when there are conflicts that are partisan. But I can tell you that this issue, solving this for the retirees, restoring those benefits, is a bipartisan issue. And it is bicameral. The Senate and the House, Republicans and Democrats alike, who have had this presented to them, come to the same conclusion that this was an injustice and these benefits need to be restored. It's an issue where the bipartisanship has never wavered. It is not as if there's any point in this over decade-long dispute where one group that's supporting this has wavered and the other or the other has wavered. This has been strong bipartisanship. It's important because in order to get anything really done in Congress, it has to be bipartisan. Almost everything that you see that is partisan, are usually bills that only pass, one house or the other, or perhaps are a White House proposal that might not even get action from the House or the Senate. But here, making certain that the leadership of both the House and the Senate and the White House, regardless of who sits in the White House, hears a unified and bipartisan, bicameral voice in this is absolutely essential.
And Representative Kildee, you talk about getting it done. Let's take a moment. The process from here concerning this bill, everybody's asking, what would it take to get this out of committee, and who or how would it get to a vote?
Well, I think one of the challenges we have, and this is where the DSRA and their family members can help, is to get more members of Congress speaking up, signing on to the legislation, speaking to leadership on both sides of the aisle and in both the House and the Senate, and just making the case that this is important. Because so many of the retirees are concentrated in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and New York, we tend to have more support from people from those areas. But there are retirees in many, many states that could reach out to their members of Congress and their senators and say, look, this is an injustice. You should join onto this legislation. So, to me, that's the challenge that we face: is that it's an isolated, geographically isolated group of retirees, but an injustice is an injustice, no matter where it takes place, and that's why it's important that people speak up, have their voices heard. We've got the congressional August recess, where we're all back home in our districts. It's a great opportunity for DSRA members to reach out and communicate that message.
Representative Kildee, your legislative team has worked the Hill, so to speak. I was part of that news conference back, I believe, March, right, when you announced this. So what are people on the Hill telling you? What are the agencies telling you? And what about any potential opposition, possibly from the PBGC?
Well, the PBGC is not in a position to oppose. Their responsibility is to administer the laws of the United States. And if we pass this, it's a law. And they're not in a position to weigh in. I hope they don't. I don't think they will. It's typically not the case that they would lobby. But, obviously, they've been a part of this difficulty. So I'm aware of that. But when Secretary Yellen, I had her, as you might recall, before the Ways and Means Committee, and I specifically asked her if she supported a legislative solution to this. She said she did. She's one of the highest ranking people in the government. The president has said that he supports resolving this problem, although he hasn't been specific in terms of what he would support. So at this point in time, it's really in the hands of Congress. I haven't heard of any organized opposition. What we need is just more voices of support. And then we need to find the appropriate vehicle. It's difficult to move legislation like this as a standalone bill. We can include it in another spending bill because there's money involved. It's important that we do it that way so that we don't have to come up with a cut to another program or some sort of tax increase to offset the modest costs that would be required to pass this. If we put it in another spending bill, it's sort of part of a larger effort.
Congressman Turner, taking a look at that old civics lesson, government lesson, a bill is introduced, then comes negotiation. What happens in terms of negotiation here, and what about possible changes? Is that something that could be in the picture?
Well, I think all of us are looking for ways that this bill can move. And in any bill, there can be changes along the way. Most important issue is the foundational aspect of restoring the pensions. And I don't think anybody's going to waver from that. And I don't think that anyone has to look at that there being a change there. There is some excitement here as that we're getting to the end of a legislative year during an election cycle, which tends to mean a lot of things that are stuck get dislodged. So we're hoping, and everybody's pushing to the greatest extent that they can. At the end of this year, with every 2-year cycle in which we've been pushing this, there's sort of an etch-a-sketch and we start up again. But the restoration of these pensions is a high priority for those of us who have certainly come together to work on this.
Congressman Turner, let's turn now to the salaried retirees. More than 43,000 letters and calls to Capitol Hill tells you and others of the hope the retirees have for the end to what really is a nightmare. And every time we say write and call, our people do exactly that. That congressional recess is just around the corner. To what extent do you urge DSRA members to meet and to talk to their representatives? What's the best way to make contact, and hopefully face-to-face contact if that's still a possibility?
The best, obviously, is in groups, and the best is to have a large geographic footprint. Obviously, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and those areas have a high concentration of Delphi salary retirees because of families in the area, historically having worked in the area. Any other areas where retirees have moved to, where they can bring their members up to speed, is very, very helpful and very important. But I know you guys have done, because you have been such incredible executives of the company. It really does show your acumen and depth, and I know you have managed this communication very, very well.
Congressman Turner, let's take a look at one more point. And you, of course, have had a lot of Dayton area people into your offices there and on the Hill. I know that. DSRA members recognize that each of you, that is yourself, Congressman Turner, as well as Congressman Kildee and the others, have been working for a long time to resolve this nightmare. DSRA members appreciate the efforts in the past few minutes. Each of you has given us a legislative update concerning the Susan Muffley Act. Now, having said that, I want to focus on hope. What hope is there? What hope for these people that House Ways and Means will move this bill forward and get this legislation to a vote? We are talking about hope.
Well, I have worked on a number of bills since I've been on Capitol Hill that have taken nearly a decade to move. And many of those bills, in order to be able to get them done, when you'd present them to someone who was in a decision-making position, would have some objection, some question, some fatal flaw that they saw in it, or even perhaps some fundamental philosophical reason why they would have a different opinion. In this bill, over the years that I've worked on this, including with administrations and in support of the litigation in federal court, I have never run into anyone who has a fundamental, foundational problem with this issue. People understand this was an injustice. They're looking more for how than any opposition. And I think that's the hope, and that's why we can't give up. There are some things where you face opposition, and sometimes the opposition is too great. That's not this one. This is one where it's trying to get the vehicle, trying to make certain the timing is right, trying to make certain we've got the right audience and the right support to be able to get this finished. But the hope, I think, springs from there's not a person that I have sat across from in all the times that I've been advocating for this who had a philosophical or even political or substantive objection to getting this done. It's just how, and the fact that there's so many demands up here, whether or not the timing is right to be able to get this through.
Representative Kildee, we are talking about hope.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing to address, because it's hard to know until the opportunity occurs where we can get this bill in another vehicle. I've seen so many times where it's just at the last minute when something's coming together, we're putting elements into a piece of legislation. The goal is to put this in. I would say there's reason for hope, but we need to be realistic. It's going to take more effort. We have hope because we have the solution available. It's right in front of us. The legislation's written. We have the Secretary of the Treasury on board saying a legislative fix is something they would support. And so we have a reason to be hopeful. But, you know, I'm realistic to say this. We've got work to do. We've still got more work to do. I don't give up until I succeed. There's not anything I take on that I ever give up on. And so we're going to get this done. My worry, of course, Mike, is that time matters. Every month that passes, every year that passes, there's the potential of another sad circumstance like the Susan Muffley case. You know, people. I know of people who left us, who passed on, some tragically, during this 13-year period. And so the point I keep trying to make to my colleagues is that, you know, I get this, yeah, this makes sense, we should do it. My point is, time matters here. And so, you know, I want us all to create a greater sense of urgency. The one thing that really does make a difference is the more personal the contact that your members have with the members of Congress, the more successful, the more effective it is. I mean, the volume of letters makes a big difference, but a personal meeting in a district office is really powerful, especially when someone can tell their own story. You know, what this has meant to them, how this has inflicted pain on their families. The date is important, but there's nothing quite like the power of an individual story to move a member of Congress to act.
That is Democratic Representative Dan Kildee of Michigan's 5th Congressional District, along with Republican Representative Mike Turner of Ohio's 10th Congressional District. On the line is a frequent presentation of the DSRA. Breaking news reported at once. What we do today affects you tomorrow. Now more than ever, support the DSRA. This is Michael Hisson.